So I would say the most important thing to avoid greenwashing is to know your materials, to understand the difference between synthetic and natural. And then that way, when you see lots of percentages and 70% recycled, it means that there's not a full amount of recycling on that garment, and you have to look at the item and sit there and wonder, okay, so which parts are recycled and which aren't? And if it's things like the zip and the buttons, then you're fine. But if it's things like, 30% of this it's the skirt, so it means that the actual material itself that's made out of it is not 100% cotton or what have you, then you have a question of whether or not you want to, make that purchase. As a consumer, you have all the power.
Exactly.
So the more we're self-informed, the better it is for, everything in that consumer cycle. Recycled fabrics often can't be recycled. That's one thing people need to know. So if they're buying recycled already, it doesn't mean it's going to be an item that can be recycled after they've finished with it. So it's almost better just to stick with either a virgin synthetic or a natural fiber. But obviously, I'd never recommend anyone to buy a virgin synthetic fabric piece of clothing unless it's an item designed for a sport, for example, like you're going hiking and you need a specific weather-related outfit. Buy it as a non-recycled item, and then it can be recycled later on. But these are changing all the time. So maybe there'll be a new opportunity that will come to light where recycled fibers can actually be recycled in a way that's not just into mattresses and other items that aren't more clothing items. But as you said, there is enough clothing to outfit the next 6 generations. So I think one thing that when we're looking at things like greenwashing, as you mentioned, we are, the people that fall for it. So if we can make that conscious decision to reduce our spending overall, to not go out looking for new clothes, to not be led by trends that are flashing up online, not digitally divest from, our morals in that respect, then we can hopefully become more sustainable consumers and have a more sustainable mindset in that respect.
That's totally right. That's actually the main purpose of that podcast series, to make, the awareness around the sustainability. Because I'm not going to blame the people, because some of them don't have the education or they're not aware of this thing. But as you said, it's the power is in our hands, or the person who's listening to this, it's in their hand. So if you know the things, if you're hearing this podcast, just keep it in your mind, and when the time comes, act on it. Because your act matters. If everybody do their own part, I believe it's gonna be more easier to make a difference. So to act together. Also, according to your experience, what kind of transparency should brand use to gain trust of the people?
The way in which brands can really show they mean business as a sustainable outlet is offering up the information, transparent manufacturing, for example. So telling us where they source the fabric from, making sure it's ethically sourced, making sure it's fair trade and fair pay for all the workers, and showing obviously that it's a smaller consignment amount. If you have 1 million pieces in a size S, then you have 1 million in an M, 1 million in an L. It's much more sustainable for a brand to be taking orders and making based on their orders. So if you do it that way around, it is called slow fashion. So you're not overbuying and you're not producing too much waste. It is more costly to do it that way for a brand. Personally, I much rather pay a bit more on the basis that, there's only 10 other people that have this item rather than 1 million.
Right.
But that's my personal preference. No. I think that if other people have that too, then, there's a lot of slow brands that are made by real people and not, larger corporations.
Right.
And they would be very, very grateful to, have conversations. So if you ask questions and the brand doesn't answer, then I'd question, their commitment to a sustainable output. But if you ask questions of a small or slow brand, they're going to be very happy that you are doing, and they're going to be able to, really commit to being sustainable in that respect, and actually giving you, the full manufacturing scope. But transparency is key.